Yeah, okay. Right, good evening everybody. Welcome to the May Cabinet meeting. I'd like to start by welcoming Councillor Christian Bright to his first public Cabinet meeting. And I'd also like to say something about Craig McKinley, who retires today as the MP for South Thanet. I think we've all been struck by the courage and fortitude that Mr McKinley has shown in dealing with the very severe health challenges that he's faced over recent months, and I'm sure that everybody would like to send him our best wishes and to his family, and to hope that his recovery continues, and we wish him all the best for the future. Okay, fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones, and do not make or receive calls while this meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will be subsequently available on the internet. Does anybody intend to film the meeting? No. So the following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 4, Councillors Pugh, Scobie, Garner and Davis. Item 5, Councillor Scobie. Item 6, Councillor Bayford. Item 7, Councillor Davis. Item 8, Councillor Cupp. Item 9, Councillor Pugh, Councillor Scobie, Councillor Austin and Councillor Davis. Are there any more requests to speak?
Yes.
Councillor Banbury? Okay.
Is my name mentioned on number 9?
No, I can add you to agenda item number 9. Any more? I should welcome Councillor Dawson, who's a shadow cabinet member as well. Apologies. Okay. In terms of apologies for absence, Councillor Alban and Councillor Whitehead. Everybody else is here. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have an interest to declare the items of business on the agenda? No. Minutes of the previous meeting from the 25th of April are in the agenda pack. I propose to take the minutes as read. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Keane. Members agree? Thank you. So we move on to item 4, which is the adoption and implementation of anti-idling legislation, which is Councillor Keane.
Thank you. So the introduction of vehicle anti-idling powers to council enforcement officers is the subject. The delegation of these powers to enforcement officers will enable fixed penalty notices to be issued where a warning has already been given and ignored. The powers will enable the Environmental Protection Team to carry out anti-idling campaigns around schools within air quality management areas, with a focus on education and raising public awareness rather than enforcement. But where advice has been ignored and the driver has refused to comply with a request, it will enable officers to issue a fixed penalty notice. Air quality has improved across Thanet in the last 5 years. There have been no exceedances of national air quality objectives across the district during this period. However, a precautionary AQMA was declared in Ramsgate last June, and an action plan is currently being developed, which will include improvement measures to ensure Thanet continues to comply with national air quality objectives. Anti-idling enforcement will be just one tool within the action plan to enable greater focus in key areas and behavioural change campaigns. Thanet District Council is committed to improving the environment for our residents and reducing health inequalities often associated with air pollution. So, Cabinet is requested to approve the implementation and enforcement of provisions relating to anti-idling as laid down by the Road Traffic Vehicle Emissions Fixed Penalty England Regulations of 2002. Delegate authority to the Director of Environment to authorise relevant officers or persons to stop the commission of stationary idling offences and issue fixed penalty notices in respect of such offences in accordance with the Regulations 6.3 of the Road Traffic Vehicle Emissions Fixed Penalty England Regulations 2002, and agree fees and charges for 2024 to 25 to be varied to reflect this decision, with new charges for vehicle emissions fixed penalty notices of £20 rising to £40 if not paid within 28 days. I therefore ask that Cabinet approve the delegation of anti-idling powers to council enforcement officers.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Is there a seconder? Councillor Yates, thank you. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Keane. I appreciate this is probably all very well intentioned, and of course we want to see air quality improve across the district, not least just for ourselves but also for the environment. But I'm a little bit concerned at the reasoning for this, particularly, and I suppose my questions centre around how much resource do we actually have to be able to enforce this and carry this out, particularly at a time when we're struggling to recruit parking enforcement officers, and we have been for some time. If, as you say, Councillor Keane, it means that actually there's more, in general, more officers of the council will be able to issue these fines. If that is then the case, then my question is, if we can expand enforcement powers to more officers, then surely we should be doing that to enforce and to stop residents and visitors from littering, illegally parking and everything else. We should focus on what we're trying to enforce at the moment rather than add more to the burden. And my final comment would be is that I'm a bit concerned that this will probably unjustly target people that are picking up their children from school and stuff like that. And I think probably the reason why they're sitting there with their car engines going is that because, as we know, along outside many of our schools, there's not a lot of safe places to park. There's not a lot of space for them to be able to pick up their kids quickly. And they may need to move at a moment's notice. So I'm a little bit concerned that enforcement officers will target parents picking up their kids rather than have the difficult conversations with the delivery drivers, some of them that are parking in the top of Margate High Street out of McDonald's with their engines running, because of course they don't want the violent confrontation, which I'll be honest, if I was an enforcement officer I wouldn't either. So I'm just a little bit concerned that we're probably going to end up targeting the wrong people and penalising, those who are generally a little bit more responsible, rather than actually going for the people that are probably having the most negative impact.
Councillor Keane.
Thank you for your questions. I think that this is more than just well-intentioned. I think it is something that actually a lot of parents outside schools are also concerned about, for the pollution that their children have to walk through by cars that are idling outside those areas. And I think that the focus of what we are doing is very much about education rather than the enforcement of, or the issuing of fixed penalty notices. And I think that's the right way to do it. It will be part of a campaign to raise awareness of this. So I don't think anyone will be unfairly targeted. I think it's just an education and behaviour change process that we need to go through. Obviously, there isn't any more resource attached to this at the moment. There may be in the future, but there isn't at the moment. And it is something that, people flag up to us, not only outside schools, but also at some other hotspots along the coastline and that. So I think generally the public will be pleased to see this brought in. And I can't answer the question about, sort of whether we should focus on what we're doing sort of with the enforcement officers for other areas like littering and that's a separate issue. But I do think that this is a really beneficial thing for our area.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask a specific question around where the focus is going to be initially, because from reading the report it looks like there's only one school that currently comes into the air quality management area, and that's St Lawrence Junior School. So is that where the priority is going to be given? Obviously we can talk about the potential impacts long term and what that means, but the report seems specifically state schools within that area will be a focus, and from my reading there's only one. And going through that area quite often, it's not somewhere where parents can drop their kids off, at least you hope they wouldn't, because it's a main road. So anybody that gets to that school, who's as a parent, is probably parking elsewhere and walking up. So the majority of idling is actually taking place by commuters who are stuck in traffic. So in that case, I think some of the arguments being put probably don't apply here, because it is actually commuter traffic that is causing the potential pollution. But I just wanted to check whether there are other schools that we envisage being within that.
I think, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Scobie, there are 2 schools around that junction, on either side of the junction. Yeah. Councillor Keane?
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Scobie. All schools are going to be the target of this, so it's, you know, sort of Ramsgate has come up because that is our only area where we've got the current poor air quality that we really want to improve on, but it will be all schools because it affects all schools and children. But also this covers all vehicles, and so going back to Councillor Pugh's question, which I forgot, you know, sort of it won't just be parents dropping off children, it will be any vehicle that is idling. Now, when it comes to vehicles stuck in traffic, then there are a term within the report that says, you know, that there will be exceptions made when there are obvious reasons why someone cannot comply. So I think the report does cover what we need it to cover. And as I say, I think it will be very beneficial for our residents, for our area, and particularly for the children. But it won't just be one school that is focused on.
Yeah, I think, Councillor Keane, I think that the regulations actually specifically exempt people who are stuck in traffic jams. So I don't think there's any possibility of people who are trying to go from one place to another, or in a moving vehicle, or a vehicle that's trying to move, will actually be caught under this. Councillor Garner.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this. You'll probably remember I asked you to consider this at the February's council meeting, and I'm pleased that you are going to follow the lead of other progressive councils in the UK and take this proposal forward, allowing or asking enforcement officers to issue fixed penalty notices to drivers when they witness a car idling and refuse to turn the engine off. As I mentioned in February, the Royal College of Physicians estimate that 40,000 deaths a year in the UK are linked to air pollution, with engine idling contributing to this by increasing the amount of exhaust fumes in the air. So this shouldn't be seen, as it is by some, as a scheme to penalise drivers. It should be seen as a scheme to stop penalising pedestrians, especially children walking to and from school. There is no logical reason why drivers sitting waiting in a car need to keep their engines running, unnecessarily increasing the pollution levels in the area. At a recent Climate Emergency Advisory Group meeting, we heard from a number of youngsters from schools in Broadstairs who told us about ways in which they'd like to see us make it easier and safer for them to walk or cycle to school. I hope that once this scheme has been bedded in, we'll consider some of the other ideas they and others are proposing to make our roads safer for all of us to use and to walk next to. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree with your comments. As I say, I think this is a very positive move. I also think it's really important to keep in mind that largely this is not about penalising drivers, it's about educating them, and enforcement will be a last resort rather than a first one, but I think there are benefits for our community.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you, Chair. I've got several questions as well as a couple of observations. And to be honest, I am quite confused about why, not about why we need to look after the environment outside our schools, but as to why school traffic is being blamed for the congestion there. I know it causes congestion, however, every school's got zigzag lines outside it, and it's a complete and utter offence to stop there. So I'm afraid I'd question the evidence of people sitting outside schools with their engines running, because if there's one part of the road that you can generally guarantee on getting past, it's schools, because of the zigzag lines. So as I say, slightly confused there, but the Youth Council also came up with what I thought was an excellent idea to address congestion, which was to have drop-off points. And in fact, the 3 schools that were represented here do have land that could be dedicated so that there was a lane for those that are being dropped off to filter off and through. That in itself prevents idling, pollution, etc., etc. But I do, and there is an issue with vehicles idling, but I don't think it's where we're saying they are. I'll give you, for instance, where I have regular contact with a resident at the top of Plains of Waterloo, where it joins Bellevue Road in Ramsgate. There's a corner shop there. She is constantly driven mad by people pulling up on the corner, on the yellow lines, leaving their engine running and running in the corner shop. That, I believe, is perhaps the sort of where the area that if we're going to target this needs to be targeted. And this in no way undermines care for children or anything, please understand that. I also would like to know why it's so low. If we're going to fine people, a parking fine's £50 or £70. You're not allowed to charge more? Okay, in which case, is it potentially costing us money? Because the amount of administration to follow through on a fine, were one to be issued, I'd question the value there. What I'd like to see personally, and people that have talked to me about this, is the educational side, maybe some signs reminding people. But the actual process of threatening to fine seems to be extremely flawed. Again, St Lawrence School, if that's being used as the model, it's completely unrepresentative, because some genius decided to allow a fire station opposite. The congestion there is nothing to do with the school traffic, it's to do with the bottleneck that's already there and was created and isn't being helped by the number of homes being built. However, as I say, I think the policy is flawed and achieves nothing, and I'd just like to point out, and I heard what Councillor Garner said about other progressive councils, and what many may not be aware is that this was a Conservative policy 2 years ago in Canterbury, and it was implemented, and it's been that successful that not a single ticket has been issued. Is it worth it? So I believe the question is the policy worth it? Not the aim of it. I'm all for the aim of it, but I think there's flaws that we need to address.
Quite a strange assumption, Councillor Davis, that the success of the policy should be measured by the number of tickets issued. I'd have thought the fact that no tickets are issued could also be a measure of the success of the policy. Anyway, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Obviously, there's quite a lot of questions there, so if I miss any, then do remind me. But I have tried to write them down as you spoke. So the first one, the zigzag areas. Yes, obviously, people aren't supposed to park on them, and largely they don't. It's not impossible for them to. But that only covers a small area outside the school, and what cars do is park right back along the road further along, and you know, sort of, so it doesn't just affect those zigzag areas. You said about the youth council and drop-off points, and I think that's a good idea, but I also think you need to see this as part of a larger plan we are putting together to address this issue. So there may well be other measures in future. This is just the start of it. You said about vehicles idling in other areas, not outside schools, but as I say, we sort of can address any area where there's a lot of idling for whatever reason. And what I would suggest is that councillors are welcome to contact me if they have concerns about particular areas that they would like the focus to be put on. I've heard some people saying with the amount of fines, that is the legally set fine, so we are not at liberty to change or increase that. And it is expected that only a small number of fines will be issued because, and you then went on to say about the educational side, but that's very firmly embedded in what we're trying to do. Rather than, it's not a money-making thing to raise a huge income through fines, it's about educating people, in effecting behaviour change, and this is just about the health of our community. Councillor Everett has already raised the point with Canterbury not issuing any tickets. That is not the main aim of this scheme in any area that has done it. It's about improving air quality. And obviously Ramsgate came under particular focus because they already have an AQMA in action there because of pollution rates. And it will also be part of this bigger plan we're putting together. Did I cover everything?
I've not got anything to miss that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Councillor Bambridge?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think they've got anything left, actually. I was really pleased to see that where the vehicle was stationary owing to the necessities of the traffic exemption, because I thought otherwise we'd all be getting, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 tickets a day with all the congestion and traffic jams everywhere at the moment. But obviously I realise, you know, I hear what Councillor Garner's saying. I mean, like, all of this is having an awful environmental impact in the area, all these tailbacks and traffic jams, these traffic lights. But I know that obviously, you know, like, this is a well-intentioned policy and I'm completely for it. I'm just thinking about the enforcement side again. I mean, how far are we now with recruiting people to actually be able to enforce this? And are they going to be like hanging around schools, or are they going to be? Yeah, I know. I mean, like, if this exemption wasn't here, they could go up and down like Westwood Cross and Up Hang Road, and they'd be picking people up all the time. But yeah, no, just wondering about the numbers there. And are they going to be enforcing this outside the schools all the time? I mean, like, how's this going to be launched? I mean, are there going to be leaflets dropped outside the schools to motorists and everything, just basically making them aware of this policy and the reasons for why we're doing it?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Bainbridge, or questions. This is going to be in other areas, so, you know, it's not just going to be outside the schools, as I say, any areas that suffer from this. And I know last year I was contacted particularly about coaches idling, so we can look at where we need to focus this, but also with the enforcement part of it, it can be other officers. If you read in the report, sort of, it can be a number of council officers. We're still doing ongoing recruiting to the actual enforcement officer role, but there are other roles within the council that could be given these powers to do. In terms of the publicity, we've already done a press release in the local news, but obviously until it has come to Cabinet and hopefully been accepted, then we can't start planning a publicity campaign, but that will be the next step alongside, as I said, the greater air quality plan that we're going to be looking at how we take that forward.
Thank you, Councillor Keane. I have to say, from my perspective, residents in my ward, I think, would welcome more enforcement against the parking outside Newington Primary School, and I'm sure that they'd also welcome people being encouraged to switch off their engines. So I look forward to that going forward. I look forward to us getting some yellow lines in the area around the school, because people certainly park over a much wider area than the zigzags outside the school. And the only positive thing I can say about that is it is a sign of how successful the school is, that it attracts pupils from far and wide, which is a great thing for Newington. Members, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm really happy to second this motion as the chair of the Climate CAG. As Councillor Garner's kind of very well put, we had a meeting in February where students from Charles Dickens and St George's Primary and Secondary School came, and one of the big issues for them was the air quality when walking in and out of those schools. So I'm really glad that today we can push this forward, not just for the community but for those students who were there to say, look, we are making action. And I would fully support some signage to remind drivers of this. So to answer Councillor Bainbridge's point, I'm hopeful we can get some signage as part of this, but we're early on in the stage of this, so I think that'll be a really good step to to remind drivers of this on an ongoing basis. So, yeah, thanks.
Councillor Bright.
Thank you. I just wanted to come up back on a couple of the points that were made. Firstly, I'm a bit disappointed that Councillor Garner stole my thunder because I had 36,000 deaths a year linked to air pollution. I think it was probably a rounding thing. But I thoroughly support this. I was thinking about my ward, and we also have places like Victoria Parade where coaches drop off, sit there, engine running, and that's not nice for any of the residents. Also, the thing that wasn't really mentioned is around schools. Yes, we have zigzag lines, but people park elsewhere. So I have residents in Holm Oak Gardens in Viking Ward who complain they have to keep their windows closed in the summer during school drop-off and pick-up times. And look, this isn't about enforcement. I completely agree. This is nudge theory in action, isn't it? I got into my car tonight and I put my seatbelt on like I have done every single day since I passed my driving test. Not because I think I'm going to get fined, but because it's habit forming. And this is all about habit forming, and this is the education part. If people know that they're going to get fined, they just think twice about it, and they think, well, I will turn my engine off just in case. And it also gives schools and hospitals and care homes a platform to speak to visitors and to speak to parents. So I thoroughly support it, and I think it will be as effective as the fact that I bet everyone in this room put their seatbelt on tonight, and I bet no one knows anyone who's ever been fined for not wearing one.
Wasn't the Prime Minister fined for not wearing a seatbelt?
Perfect
Not that I would
timing.
claim or want to know the Prime Minister.
The one person in the country daft enough.
Okay, anything else, members? No? Okay. Well, I think that's been an interesting exploration of the issues. I've got to say I'm slightly disappointed that Councillor Pugh didn't repeat his reference to ULEZ, which I found quite amusing, and wholly disproportionate to what we're discussing here. I don't see a downside in us in taking the powers to do this, and I hope that we're going to be able to make some improvements as a result. So Cabinet is requested to approve the implementation and enforcement of provisions relating to anti-idling as laid down by the Road Traffic Vehicle Emissions Fixed Penalty England Regulations 2002. Delegate authority to the Director of Environment to authorise relevant officers or persons to stop the commission of stationary idling offences and issue fixed penalty notices in respect of such offences in accordance with the Regulation 6.3 of the Road Traffic Vehicle Emissions Fixed Penalty England Regulations 2002 and agree for fees and charges for 2024-25 to be varied to reflect this decision, with new charges for vehicle emissions fixed penalty notices of £20 rising to £40 if not paid within 28 days. Do members agree? Thank you. We move on to item 5, which is the new policy for property risks and compliance, which is Councillor Duckworth, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the current arrangements to deal with the risk and compliance management of our operational properties work in a decentralised manner. This has resulted in varying levels of compliance. The new property risk and compliance policy seeks to centralise and clarify responsibilities, ensuring uniform compliance across council assets by having the property team handle compliance testing and reporting and the facilities team manage remedial actions, while the building occupier will also have ownership of some compliance elements. The new policy seeks to streamline these processes and to clearly define responsibilities to ensure uniform compliance across the council's operational assets. So I'm asking Cabinet to approve the implementation of the new property risk and compliance policy.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Do you have a second? Councillor Yates. And speaking under 20.1, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. This doesn't relate necessarily directly to the policy itself, but more a approach of the council to policies themselves. I raised this point of scrutiny under the next item, that there were several policies there that, to me, did not follow how I would expect a policy would look. And since scrutiny, I've spent some time doing some research in terms of expectations in policies around review dates, document control. And when this popped up, I wanted to ask the question as to, we're saying that this is quite a major policy change. You've got 6 going into 1, and it's based on based on an issue in the past. Under international standards, the recommendation for how often a policy should be reviewed is annually, with further reviews taking place if there are any major changes. Under the Plan, Do, Check, Act model of policies, again, policy should be reviewed annually. And I actually downloaded the template on the Health and Safety Executive to see how often they recommend a policy should be reviewed, and it's annually. Now, in this policy, it says that it's every 2 years. It won't be reviewed for another 2 years. I don't think the exact date had been put in yet, but I can't see any reason why local government policies should be reviewed at a longer period than what in most other organisations is quite accepted. It should be annually. And so my comment or question here is, can we look to maybe bring this policy and future policies into best practice, even if internal audit, which appear to be that they are fine with this. I do think best practice outside of local government would be that policies are reviewed annually or when there has been a major change.
Yeah, I don't know if we're in a position to respond to that tonight, but we can get the policy officer to have a look at it. And I think one of the things we want to know is what other local authorities do. I take your point that local authorities shouldn't necessarily have different frequencies from other organisations, but I think it will be helpful to understand what they do. Yeah, go on.
I just want to say the point. If the Health and Safety Executive template is saying it should be done annually, I think that's probably a good starting point, not necessarily what other local councils are doing, but I take your point that you want to take this away.
Do you want to come in, Mr. Porter?
Thank you. I think one of the key things here is that policies are kept under review by officers on a regular basis. The question is whether you would want a report coming to overview and scrutiny panel or cabinet for a policy that didn't need any amendment. And I think I'd suggest that you probably wouldn't want that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the officers aren't keeping policies under review.
Okay, but I think we'll take that away and we'll come back to you with a further response. Members? No? Okay, so it's been proposed to approve the implementation of the new property risk and compliance policy. Is that agreed? Great, thank you. We move on to item 6, and for tonight's purposes, I am Councillor Whitehead. I'll read out what this says, even though it'll give you a laugh, Councillor Scobie. Policies need to be reviewed on a regular basis to ensure that they are still working in the way that they were intended and are kept up to date with current legislations or regulations. Policies that have been reviewed in this respect, and I should have said it's the housing compliance policies, are gas safety, electrical safety, passenger lifts, water hygiene and asbestos. The fire safety policy was reviewed and adopted in June 2023 following the introduction of the Building Safety Act 2022 and the strengthening of fire safety regulations. Changes made to 5 policies are the removal of repetition, thus shortening the policies, ensuring the policies reflect current legislation, regulation and best practice, removal of reference to other council departments and complete review of the reporting regime. The current policies are reflective of our performance in landlord health and safety when the service transitioned in-house from the Almo East Kent Housing in October 2020. At this time our compliance was poor and we were under notice by the regulator for social housing. The current policies were drafted for us by a consultant and they supported a very robust monitoring and reporting regime reflective of our requirements at the time and the need to provide assurance that we were improving our position. We've now looked to reduce the reporting through these new policies as the compliance work streams are now operating as business as usual rather than recovery. This means that much of the reporting is now redundant. We can still provide assurance with a high level of overview of our compliance position with commentary that would explain any fluctuations in statistics. Any cause for concern is escalated at the time and dealt with immediately, and this would be reflected through performance reports with an explanation in the commentary. So I move the recommendations set out in the report, which are to adopt the 5 amended compliance policies and delegate authority to the Head of Tenant and Leaseholder Services in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Housing to make minor operational changes to the policies as required. Have a seconder, please. Councillor Keane. And speaking under 20.1 is Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Leader.
I'd like to thank the head of Tenant Leaseholder Services for bringing about the update of these 5 policies, which is crucial when there are constant changes in laws to meet the need for increased safety for our tenants and leaseholders. I'm particularly pleased that TDC will use the legal remedies available should any resident refuse access to carry out essential lift safety related inspections or work to remove asbestos and essential electrical safety related inspections. And also that there are to be follow-up inspections for work carried out on gas installations. It's unreasonable for the safety of residents to be put at risk by the actions of a few, and essential work that is checked to protect our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if there's anything. You want to say anything on that, Mr. Sullivan? No. No. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Any discussion? No? Is that agreed? Thank you. Okay, we shall move on to item 7, which is Port of Ramsgate maintenance dredging, which is me. This report describes the proposed plan for maintenance dredging at the Port of Ramsgate for this financial year. The dredging plan will require a key decision to undertake a single dredging campaign with an estimated value of £362,000. Proposed dredging will be undertaken via an existing 4+1 year maintenance dredging term contract that was awarded to the marine contractor Van Ord in 2021. The total value of the 2024-25 dredging plan is £477,000. However, the budget value is currently £325,000, and the report therefore also recommends a one-off general fund revenue budget environment from the corporate contingency budget to fund the estimated £152,000 shortfall. The proposed dredging is via a method known as hydrodynamic dredging, which mobilises deposited sediments back into the water column. The suspended sediment then leaves the harbour on a falling tide. This is more financially efficient than methods such as grab dredging. The dredging plan this year will focus on the port turning circle, port entrance, harbour entrance and the approach to berth 4 and 5. The Council has a contractual obligation to provide vessels with access to berths 4 and 5 for the purpose of discharging cargoes to the Brett aggregate site. The volume of sediment to be removed during this dredging campaign is approximately 124,000 cubic metres, which for context is roughly the same in volume as the water held in 50 Olympic-sized swimming pools. In order to secure the dredger in June, an order has been placed for a smaller 75,000 cubic metre dredging campaign at an estimated cost of £228,000. This will improve vessel access, but without the increase in volume to the more substantial dredge campaign, there's a greater chance that we would need to undertake further work later in the financial year. It's important that dredging at the port is undertaken within the next 1 to 2 months to maintain an acceptable depth of water in the port at all states of tide. It also makes sense to plan this work over the summer to avoid the increased bad weather risk associated with winter dredging. Environmental monitoring would be undertaken alongside the dredging operation to mitigate the risk of adverse effects on nearby receptors, and this is important as the port's in close proximity to multiple designated sites that are rich in biodiversity. The dredging plan for the port in June will take 2 to 3 weeks to complete. Engagement will take place with stakeholders at the port and harbour, and updates will be provided as required via usual communication channels, including notices to mariners. More details of the dredging plan can be found in Appendix A. Let me see if I can find the recommendations. They're in that document, aren't they? Yeah. So it's recommended that Cabinet approves the key decision to order works with the marine contractor Van Ord for hydrodynamic dredging with a value in excess of £250,000. This work will be undertaken via an existing 4.1 year maintenance dredging term contract that was awarded to Van Ord in June 2021, and also that Cabinet approves a one-off general fund revenue budget environment from the corporate contingency budget to fund the estimated maintenance dredging budget overspend of £152,000 in the 2024-25 financial year. I so moved. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Bright seconded that. We did have a very good discussion, or there was a very good discussion about this at the recent overview and scrutiny meeting. I thought that was very helpful in terms of member understanding, and I'm sure everybody gained an increased comprehension of the technicalities of dredging. Unfortunately, we don't have Mr Humber, who is our dredging expert, with us this evening, but I know that Mr Marmo will do his best if there are any questions. And we do have a speaker. I think is Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. A lot, as you said, an awful lot was discussed at ONS and a lot of relevant points raised. It's positive but also regrettable that we need to spend this money. And again, had we maintained and stayed on top of the port depths over the previous years, then we probably wouldn't have this lump to find now, which I do believe has disguised previous losses. However, a couple of questions I would like, and I don't know if Tony will have the answers this evening, but we're talking about dredging to 3.5 or 4 metres on the approach to berths 4 and 5, which currently are specifically for Brett's. Is that sufficient for them to operate that vessel that they're using that discharges directly onto the quayside? Because I'm sure that they would want to maximise their load. They're already having to enter and leave with partial loads because of the lack of draft available. Going down 3.5 or 4 metres potentially only gives them an opportunity to use probably 60 to 70% of the capacity available on that vessel. I'm sure no operator is going to run a vessel half empty as a matter of course, and that of course isn't just on the arrival, it's on the departure. So have we discussed with Brett's their actual requirements? Have they confirmed it? And before we go headlong into this, it could be, and again, it could be that it needs to be actually slightly deeper in order to be viable and relevant, because what we'd hate to have, of course, is having spent a load more money on promises of trade for it to carry on as it is with nothing happening. So has this been addressed, and if not, could it be? Because I think we need to ensure that we do get best value, and the deeper the better, to be honest.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. I have a lot more confidence in Mr Humber than you appear to have, but anyway, we'll ask Mr Marmo what he thinks.
I can confirm that we did meet with Brett's prior to undertaking the discussions with Van Ord in terms of the order that we've placed so far, and Brett's were comfortable with the depths that we were discussing, and they were confirming that that would be sufficient for their needs for their largest vessel.
Thank you, that seems to deal with that. Members, any comments? Councillor Bright?
Obviously, this is, I think the point was made, and Councillor Davis made it as well, was that we've obviously let the sediment build up over a number of years. Doing this now, does it guard us from spending quite as much in future years? And the secondary question I have to that is, if we're successful in finding an operator for the port, can this cost be passed on? Are there any kind of routes into port that we can pass on to future operators?
I think that as part of the proposals around the levelling up, there's a capital dredge, which if I remember is quite expensive. Mr Marmo might remember the figure, I don't know. But certainly there would need to be further dredging for that, and that's always been understood. But of course, if you get larger vessels coming in and out of the port, then that will itself shift the sediment. I mean, I think some of this discussion about what should have happened in the past is misplaced, because at the end of the day, the decision was taken only to do sufficient dredging for what was happening at the port. You could look all around the district and say cuts were made which have reduced services to a level where they've not been satisfactory for residents, thanks to the government, local government financial situation. I think in this case there would have been not a lot of point in doing dredging that wasn't required. Where we are at this stage is we're responding to the surveys that we carry out and doing the work now. I'm not sure there would have been any advantage in doing the work previously, personally.
I'm not passing comment on what happened previously. I'm just saying, because we're doing this and we seem to be doing it all in one go, does that therefore make our lives easier going for the in future? And you've kind of alluded to that in terms of the vessels themselves.
I think what we are clear about is there is an ongoing need for dredging, and there will be an ongoing need for dredging. Okay, members, if there's no other comments, that's been moved and seconded. Is that agreed? Thank you. We move on to item 8, which is the Theatre Royal Operator Model, and that's Councillor Duckworth.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to be bringing this recommendation to Cabinet as it marks a significant moment for the future of one of the district's most important heritage and cultural assets. This recommendation places the Council in the best possible position to secure a potential £7.5 million in external funding. Alongside the 2.2 million secured from Margate Town deal, additional funding applications have been made to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for 4.5 million and Arts Council, Department for Culture, Media and Sport for 3 million. Decisions on these are due in the summer. These funding applications deliver a new vision for the theatre, utilising 19 Hawley Square as a production hub, which has been supported by 19,000 people through engagement activity. This recommendation has been informed by operator market testing and an independent option appraisal and business case, on the basis that the Council will not manage the reopened theatre itself and there will be no ongoing revenue subsidy support from the Council. A new charitable entity, which is designed and set up for the purpose with local engagement and a cultural and socio-economic remit rather than for profit, is preferred by funders and is a proven model of similar sized theatres. It is therefore being recommended as the preferred model of operation for the Theatre Royal and 19 Hawley Square. This project supports the Council's corporate priority for growth by encouraging regeneration. I would like to recommend that a new independent charitable trust should be set up to act as the operator for the Theatre Royal Margate, subject to funding, noting the options appraisal set out at Appendix 2 and the work undertaken by Bonner Keenley side. 2, noting that if both the funding applications referred to in the Cabinet report are unsuccessful, a project redesign will be undertaken and a separate operator proposal will be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Keane. Speaking under 20.1, I have Councillor Cupp.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Duckworth. I think we can all agree that this is a really good initiative to bring forward, and I think that we really want to ensure that the Theatre Royal opens and is in its best success as possible. So I just wondered whether there was, by bringing this operator model forward, it guarantees that it will be open a lot sooner and make sure that we can get a business in there as quickly as possible, and also that we can ensure that we are not just opening up to smaller performances, but trying to get bigger performances, bigger productions down to ensure that there is that local interest, but also bringing the tourists into the district to ensure that it is keeping going and that there is a future there for the Theatre Royal as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cupp. I mean, there will be some dependence on how we do with the funding applications, obviously on how quickly this can all happen. And it has to be said the Theatre Royal is a small theatre, so we want it full all the time, but there is a limit on it, on how full it can be, which is 19 Hawley Square will help with in terms of the finance, in terms of creating revenue from the bar, etc.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Any other comments, members? Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to put on record my thanks to the officers' hard work to get us where we are today, where we've got 2 bids in, which is a huge achievement. I think if we found out a year ago that we'd have 2 successful bids in, we'd be over the moon. And there is demand. Margate Operatic Society just last night, I think, had their opening performance of a new show, but it had to be at the Granville Theatre in Ramsgate. So at the moment, I think we've just got the Tom Thumb Theatre as our only performing theatre, which has got seating for 50 people. So it'll be amazing to get a theatre back in Margate. And as a ward councillor who's been to the theatre and also had the pleasure of having the ghost tour around the theatre, which is really exciting as well, going around the backstage areas and under the stage. It's one of my favourite places to go, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed for those funding applications. But yeah, very well done to officers for this. Thanks.
Councillor Bright.
I'm really excited about this. The last time I went to the theatre, it was actually to the Theatre Royal, which makes me sound like a bit of a Philistine, to see my daughter in The King and I, and she was amazing, of course she was. But look, for the last 14 years, we've had the arts have been woefully underfunded. I think we've had a government in place that sees the cost of everything and the value of nothing. I think the opportunity for our young people to experience producing and putting on a show, taking part in a show, it doesn't just give them a boost there and then, it teaches them really valuable life skills. And I just think performance teachers confidence, it inspires them to get everyone involved and tap into the amazingly vibrant creative community we've got now in Thanet. It's a no-brainer, and I'm sure it will succeed, and yeah, I'm really delighted to be supporting that.
Thank you, Councillor Bright. Members, it's been moved and seconded. Do we agree? Thank you very much. Item 9, the long-term plan for towns, governance arrangements. Something makes me think that members are interested in this one. I don't know what it is. Right. So, this item addresses the governance arrangements for the allocations of up to £20 million over 10 years to Ramsgate through the government's long-term plans for towns programme. The community-led nature of the programme has been set out in the funding guidance published by the government, and we've considered how this can be best delivered in our particular circumstances. We've already engaged productively with the local community as part of the existing Levelling Up programme for Ramsgate, and the recent visit to Ramsgate by the chair of the Towns Unit was extremely well attended by local community representatives. We're now required to confirm the proposed governance arrangements for the new funding with the government by Monday the 3rd of June. And for information, we've confirmed with DLUC that the timeline remains unchanged by the somewhat unexpected general election. The proposals set out in the report build on the existing Regeneration Partnership Board arrangements by creating additional board roles for Ramsgate representatives. The board will operate at 2 levels, strategically across all of the district's regeneration programmes and specifically as a decision-making body for the long-term plan for towns programme. The terms of reference will be structured in a way that effectively manages the board's 2 distinct roles and ensures that decisions impacting on the Ramsgate long-term plan for towns programme are made by those with an interest in Ramsgate. The board will also be strengthened by the creation of a vice-chair role drawn from the representatives of Ramsgate. The existing Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board has been consulted about these proposed arrangements and are supportive. Clearly there will now be a new MP for East Thanet after the election who will be a member of the board, and we'll be briefing them as soon as possible after July the 4th. The other funds under the remit of the board have to be committed by 2026, and in the long term our ambition is to empower the representatives from Ramsgate to form a new representative structure that is able to take full control of the programme for the benefit of Ramsgate residents and businesses. So I move the recommendations set out in the report, and I'll read them once, I think. To agree to revise the membership of the existing Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board so that it's compliant with the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities guidance, enabling it to deliver the governance requirements of the Long-Term Plan for Towns programme as a Ramsgate board. Provide approval for the proposed governance arrangements to be submitted to the Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities. Acknowledge that with these arrangements, the current chair for the Thanet Regeneration Partnership Board will have responsibility in ensuring that the existing governance arrangements fulfil the requirements of the Long-Term Plan for Towns programme as set out by central government. Approve the suggested changes to the boundary as set out in Appendix 3 of this report to include all the green and blue spaces not included in the built-up areas data set map of Ramsgate. Authorise the Head of Regeneration and Growth in consultation with the Leader of the Council and the Chair of the Board to update the terms of reference and code of conduct for the Regeneration Partnership Board to reflect the guidance, and authorise the Head of Regeneration and Growth in consultation with the Leader of the Council to work with the Chair of the Board to develop a mechanism to add relevant representative organisations to the Board and to amend its membership accordingly. So I move that. I have a seconder, Councillor Yates. Thank you. And we have a number of speakers under 20.1, starting with Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I've got a few questions, but I just want to make it clear that I don't dispute the reasoning behind how this is being created and why this is being created. There's a lot of admin associated with from officers' time with dealing with the multiple boards, and that's why it was great that Thanet could be one of these trial ones for the Pathfinder and the original partnership boards, because I know about the amount of work previously under the Conservative administration that went in by officers to deal with all of the multiple different boards and scrutiny panels and stuff like that. So I don't dispute that for a second, and I don't dispute how good the chair of the partnership board is, because my past experience when he was chair of the Margate Town Deal board was that he was doing a very good job. So I can only assume that he's doing a very good job now as well. The questions that I have relate to how this kind of sub-board or whatever it is, or this new board merging with the partnership board and stuff like that, my questions is how many members from Ramsgate will there be included within the board? Particularly as I read within the report that I think there'll be 18 members, but I wasn't sure if that meant, as in general, across the whole partnership board with this new part of this board, or just the Ramsgate members board bit. My second question is, how will board members be recruited? Because I think it's really important that there's a kind of an open call for applications, because normally with a lot of things like this, and I'm not knocking the people that get volunteers from the community that give up their time, but actually I think it's important that we try and find other people within the community that care and encourage them to be involved, rather than it just be kind of a very small minority of people who are incredibly active within all of these things. Again, I'm not trying to dissuade people from taking part, but I just think there's a lot more people in the community that may, if they knew they could, want to try and have a part in this, particularly with this funding for Ramsgate. And then my final question is, and it does partially relate to my first question, but it's how many members are needed for the Ramsgate board, if different from the current partnership board, and if the merging of this board with the partnership board, I appreciate, stay with me, it's a bit complicated, will it result in fewer Ramsgate members sitting on the board as a proportion of representation? So if the board was completely separate and managed separately and admin, would it mean that there would be 18 members, but because it's going to be partially on this partnership board, there's only going to be 9? Because my only concern would be is that that's a bit of a dilution of the voices of people in Ramsgate. So they're my questions, and I appreciate it's quite heavy, and you've got a lot more people that want to ask questions.
So it is a complicated subject, and I think that we would recognise that this is not an ideal arrangement, but it's probably the best arrangement that we can come to based on where we're starting from. As to who would be involved, I think that the people who've joined the board from the business and from the community so far in general, they've been very suitable people with appropriate skills. They've not necessarily been people who would have approached us to put themselves forward. They've been people that the council's perhaps approached, and we've been successful in recruiting them because they have an interest and are keen to see the work of the partnership board be successful. There won't be any dilution of the Ramsgate influence on the board, if you put it like that. I think what we recognise is that there are people on the board who have a Thanet-wide interest, and there are people on the board who are specifically appointed because they come from Margate. So I'm thinking, for example, of the representative of the Margate Charter Trustees, who's currently been the mayor. I mean, clearly it would be a bit ridiculous for the mayor of Margate to be making decisions about how Ramsgate funding is spent. Nobody would expect that. But I think if you've got somebody who runs a business or is a business representative who operates across Thanet and has an interest across Thanet, then they have a role to play. The numbers, the level of representation making these decisions about Ramsgate will be strengthened, and the Ramsgate influence on the overall board and the bigger picture will not be diluted. In terms of specific numbers, I think Mr. Paulson might like to have a go at that one.
Yeah, I've just having a look through some draft proposals that we've been preparing, and the number that's quoted in the report is the total membership across both of those cohorts, effectively, that the leader has spoken about. I think what's important is that what we're suggesting is very specifically that the board, terms of reference, structure the meetings in a way that wider board membership, including people that are not Ramsgate representatives in one form or another, leave the meeting at the point when the long-term plan for towns programme is discussed, and the board moves into decision-making mode in specific reference to that programme. So the people in the room when the long-term plans for towns programme is being discussed will be Ramsgate people, representing the 3 tiers of local government in Ramsgate, the residents of Ramsgate, community organisations and businesses in Ramsgate. I think the other key thing that we have included in the report, and there's reference in the report to this, is having a vice chair who is a Ramsgate representative that can support that second part of the meeting and ensure that the range of views from Ramsgate are reflected in the discussions at that point.
Thanks, Mr. Porter. Yeah, I think we've dealt with the points that you raised, Councillor Pugh. There's obviously more people going to speak, so maybe anything else will come out from that. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. I have some questions and then a statement, if I may do it in two sections. My question is, this feels again like another announcement of funding for the government that doesn't actually have much structure behind it. So my questions are, did the government give us any notice that this money was coming? Did we apply for this money? Has the government given us things like funding agreements, project management plans, risk registers and other important documents like that? And if, as I think the answer is no to all of those, how are TDC going to cover for the government's, frankly, poor financial administration in giving out money without any structured documents around it? How are we going to cover for the government's, in my view, sort of negligence on this?
I think we've been grappling with the detail of this since it was first announced, and you're right that we didn't apply for it. It's not something that any authority applied for. It was simply announced. The government would say, I'm sure, according to objective criteria. Not quite sure how objective the criteria were, but we got some money, so we're not going to complain about that. I don't know, Mr. Porter, have you got anything to say in response to what Councillor Scobie said about how we're going to deal with it?
Well, I think the first part of the answer is no to all of the questions. Just to confirm that, we didn't know the money was coming and we haven't seen any of the documents you referred to. And we didn't bid for it. It was announced and it was, I think it was a surprise to everybody, a welcome surprise to everybody. Clearly, within the guidance that's on the government website, the council, as with all of the other towns in this programme, is the accountable body for the funding. So that gives the council a very specific role to ensure that the funding is used in accordance with the criteria set out in the grant conditions and all of our other constitutional requirements for the use of resources apply to the spending of this funding as well. So we have a clear role in ensuring probity in the use of the money and value for money. I think we are anticipating that following our submission of the governance arrangements and then later in the year our submission of the long-term plan, that there will be greater guidance from government as part of their approval process for our long-term plan and the specific projects that are ultimately included in that plan. So, I think we are expecting there to be much greater guidance from central government about the things that you've listed.
If I may just make the statement I sort of referenced, I just want to clearly underline that when other councillors in this authority or members of the public do ask questions around the complexities of this and maybe the fact that some of this paperwork doesn't exist, that hopefully we can all robustly defend the council on this, the fact that we are working on this, but as has just been covered by you, Leader, and Mr. Porter, we didn't ask for this money. It's absolutely welcomed, but we haven't been given the documentation that would be expected for any sort of grant from this. So in a year's time, when these documents are still being developed and worked out and project plans are being worked through, hopefully councillors and members of the public will have patience with the council on this one, because it's not the council's fault this time.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to give the impression that the council doesn't want to expedite the arrangements around this, because we certainly do. If there is a change of government, then I think it's quite likely that ministers will come in and look at the criteria and what local government is able to do with this money, and they may refine it. So there may be further uncertainty around that. But there's not much we can do about that until July the 4th. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I'd like to deal with things in reverse order from Councillor Scobie. I'd like to say a couple of things first and then ask a couple of questions. Obviously, as a Ramsgate councillor, I hugely welcome this money. We didn't expect it. We're delighted to have it. We're delighted with the themes as well. The themes under which it's being offered do match very closely some of the sorts of things that we've been asking for in Ramsgate and wanting to do for a while. So we're very hopeful about that. We are entertained by the government's description of this mechanism as community-led in view of their determination specifically to exclude those of us who are democratically elected representatives of our communities. However, we'll take that on one side and move on. We're very pleased to see the government's arrangements in terms of an increasing representation of Ramsgate, and the People's Panel seems to be a very good plan. Councillor Pugh has already asked about how selection arrangements for that, and so I won't dwell on that. But we are interested to know about whether any of the board meetings will be open to the public or available to members of the public to ask questions, how we will organise arrangements to share information with councillors and with members of the public. We didn't get to a very good start with the Adam Hawkesby meeting, which Ramsgate councillors first found out about when we started getting emails of complaint from business leaders and community leaders who hadn't been invited to the meeting. That was the first we knew of it. So we're hoping that we can establish a better communication structure so that, as Councillor Scobie says, we can give a good account of ourselves and of the processes of TDC in managing this money. And finally, picking up on your comment, Leader, just now about a possible change of government, can we ask that you would advocate with the leader of your party that he ditches most of what this government has done if he becomes Prime Minister, but not please this funding? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a nice distinction, Councillor Austin. I think there's a number of things we might want to discuss with the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party if she takes on the portfolio which will be anticipated if there's a Labour government. And certainly we would not be supportive of any attempts to reallocate this particular funding. Although I do think that this ought to be the last occasion on which arbitrary sums of money are handed out to random local authorities by central government, and local government should be funded properly and should not be competing against each other in terms of different councils for different pots of money. And I think that is Labour Party policy, so we can look forward to that change if there is indeed a change of government. I think in terms of communication, yeah, it's an interesting situation because the board is the decision maker, but the council is the responsible body. So it will be perhaps for the board to explain its decisions, but hopefully there will be an upward flow from the People's Panel and coming from the Ramsgate community. So there'll be less need for them to be going back and saying this is why we're doing this, because they'll be getting the ideas from that source in the first place. I don't know if there's anything to add to that, Mr. Poulter, is that?
Well, I think there's a question about whether the board meetings would be public or not. The current Regeneration Board, the agendas and the minutes are published on the council's website. The meetings themselves have not been so far public meetings. The terms of reference, obviously the report is recommending that the terms of reference are determined by the head of Regeneration Growth in consultation with the leader and the chair. And the chair has got very specific responsibilities set out in the guidance from government about the running of the board. Ultimately, the board will need to take a view about whether it wants to hold any meetings in public or not. But certainly the agendas and minutes, the intention would be to reflect what we already do and publish those documents on the website.
I think that it's very much about how this evolves. As we've alluded to in general around this, there's a lot of uncertainty about how it's going to work in practice. I think the important thing is that people in Ramsgate feel they're being listened to and understand the decisions that are made. That might not be through public board meetings, but there might be other mechanisms that we can find for them to do that. And I certainly think that's something we want to discuss with the chair going forward. So, thank you. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Chair. And welcome my colleagues' comments. I'd question something you mentioned, upward flow. This is supposed to be community-led, and I'd recommend that we had inward flow. There is no hierarchy here, well, there is a hierarchy, but what's very, very clear from gov.uk and the guidelines is that this should be community-led. It mentions, for instance, about the 50,000 of capacity funding that this council's already received and was designed to identify a chair for the panel and to help shape it. Have we had value for that? But it also says it's for reaching out and community engagement, even in the structuring and the original design of the panel. We sit here with a deadline of the 1st of June for this panel to be established. No time whatsoever to react to this report or to have any form of democratic application or engagement with the community. This is secret squirrel again, as we've had so many times in this authority. Those that think they know best ignore the community, and it's not on. Read what the government say. They've got a list of, and I'd like also to point out to Councillor Scobie, the offer includes a data pack for each town with local insight curated by Deluxe Spatial Data Unit, a policy toolkit outlining the powers available to the towns and partners across the town. A list of, that's town, not district. This is supposed to be localism in action, localised decision making from people invested in the town, not in Broadstairs, Margate or anywhere else. Now, whilst I would welcome the appointment of the same chair because we need joined up thinking, the spirit and principle of this is to give a voice to the people of Ramsgate and community groups, businesses, stakeholders. Rehashing what we've already got on a Thanet-wide basis and then saying, well, they can leave the room and not vote, that undermines Ramsgate. They shouldn't even be there during the debate process if those seats were designed to be for that community. And if we read what the government say, it's quite clear. In addition, there's a policy toolkit outlining powers, a list of policy interventions with the already agreed case for investment. This is endowment money that has been given. It is up to our community and us to administer that to the best effect. But there's no confusion, there's no stupidity, there's no throwing money around. This was £20 million that this authority should be extremely grateful that Michael Gove identified us as one of the original, the additional 20 towns, and we need to get ourselves and our act together in order to administer it. The tools are here. It also says that dedicated support from the area team to help guide town boards and local authorities. How much help do we need? We don't believe in big government. If they were telling us what to do, then we just become a vassal body. We have the, hopefully the maturity and the intelligence and the resources to make decisions for ourselves, which is what localism's based on. And on this is a prime example of we're just trying to rehash what's already there. There should be a separate body. I don't think that a 10-year plan, the budget for a 10-year board has any relationship to the 3-year board that's already established. That's also mentioned in here, and this should not be a rehash. It should be a clear. They may end up with some of the same people, admittedly, but it should be separately structured and the members identified therein, and specifically because of their relationship with the issues in the town rather than the issues of the island. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Davis, but I think if you read the guidance, you'll find that it's quite prescriptive in terms of who should be on the board and how the organisation should be represented. I mean, it includes, for example, the local MP, it includes a representative from the Police and Crime Commissioner. It's very specific about what elected representatives ought to be on there and ought not to be on there. We're given a very short time scale. We were not part of the original programme. I think the awards were made last October. We've had to adapt to this. We've discussed with DELA, we've discussed with the government's representative who came down to see us. We've discussed our proposed arrangements with them, and now we're submitting them. I think it's probably a little bit ambitious, the idea we should have set up a new board in the timescale that we've been given. This is the first step. We're not actually tonight appointing members to the board. We're talking about what the structure of it is and how we intend to proceed with it. And I'm sure that there'll be changes over time. We absolutely accept that this money is awarded to Ramsgate, and Ramsgate should be deciding how that money is spent. But putting in place a structure which will effectively deliver that is probably a more long-term project, and is something that we've identified in the report that we wish to do. Right. Mr. Porter?
Well, I was just going to add that it's in the report, but the long-term ambition here is to establish a Ramsgate-based structure that can take complete control of the programme. Clearly that we will need to support Ramsgate representatives to form that structure and to work out how best to do that. But the ambition set out in the report is clearly to leave a legacy in Ramsgate of an organisation that can manage the programme through the full 10 years and beyond, and ideally create capacity for that organisation to sustain itself beyond the lifetime of this funding. And it may be that includes some assets that can support an ongoing organisation beyond 10 years that is very specifically local to Ramsgate.
And of course, as you've already alluded to, in the end, the decisions that are made have to come back to this council to be assessed by the 151 officer to make sure that they are compliant and value for money. So this council does have an important role, and that's in the guidance. Okay, I've got Councillor Garner.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just wanted to raise one or maybe 2 points about this welcome £20 million that we've got to spend. And I picked out one part from one of the documents which said the funding is for the whole of area of Ramsgate, and as the guidance states, the funding should be focused on the issues that matter most to local people, including high streets, heritage and regeneration, public safety and security. So looking at the map, the neighbourhood plan map, it's quite clear what, the majority of Ramsgate, we can see Ramsgate, but I would just like to point out that the border, especially at the top, runs through the Parsons Industrial Estate, runs through the park that is around Parsons Industrial Estate, and runs through the housing estate, commonly known as the Wimpy Estate. So I just wanted you and us to make sure that when we're talking about the whole area of Ramsgate, we're not just when we run through the Wimpy Estate, we'd look to include all the people who live on the Wimpy Estate to be consulted, because they all use the park, and they all benefit from that, and they're all impacted by similar issues. So I know this is maybe the main focus of this is going to be on the town centre, I suspect. But when we do get out to the periphery, please can we make sure that the people who are consulted aren't just those who live within the boundary of Ramsgate, but also include some of the people who come on the boundary of Broadstairs and St Peter's, but are still part of that estate and part of that whole community. The Wimpy Estate is a single community of people who should all benefit from this. And leading on from that, I might like to suggest that when we're looking at the makeup of the board here, this is an opportunity to maybe get someone from maybe a town level involved from Broadstairs and St Peter's Town Council, who might be able to add value to representing those people on the periphery of Ramsgate, but who are all part of a single community on those estates. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Garner. And whilst I respect your advocacy on behalf of Broadstairs residents, there is a strict limit on the number of councillors who can be involved, and I suspect that Ramsgate councillors would be rather surprised if one of those places was taken by a Broadstairs councillor, and that includes town councillors. There's already a discussion about how many councillors can be on the board. Just in terms of the area covered by it, we're actually proposing a slight increase on what I think was the original map, which I think came from DLUC and with the money, and we've included some green areas and the sea, basically, the beaches, so that we can have the widest possible opportunity. You will appreciate that as a Newington councillor, I am always looking for opportunities to benefit the people in Newington, and I'm certainly very aware that Ramsgate isn't just the town centre, and that this funding, not only that the funding should go beyond that, but the people that we talk to about where the funding should be spent should not just be people from the town centre. And the town centre is very important, and it is the hub of the town, but we have to recognise that the community is beyond that. Whether the community is realistically beyond the Ramsgate neighbourhood plan boundary, I'm not so sure. But certainly Ramsgate isn't a walled community. People come into there from Broadstairs and Margate and the villages, and indeed elsewhere, and hopefully they will all benefit from the spending of this money. Okay, do you got anything to add to that one, Mr. Porter? Okay. Members, any discussion? Okay. So, it's been moved and seconded. I'm not going to read the recommendations again, you'll be pleased to hear. Do members agree? Agree, thank you. That concludes tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 8:20 and the live stream of the meeting will now end. Thank you for your attendance. Enjoy the rest of your evening.